Thank you for joining today's conversation with We Count artist Thaxton Waters and Shaun Giles. We'll begin with a land acknowledgement. The Frist Art Museum's building sits on land that Cherokee and Shawnee Native peoples and elders call their homeland. We acknowledge and pay respect to them. We also acknowledge and offer deep gratitude to the ancestral land and water that support us. Today's conversation is presented in conjunction with the exhibition We Count First-Time Voters. The exhibition was organized by the Frist Art Museum and is on view on our website at fristartmuseum.org/WeCount and in the Conte Community Arts Gallery. The Frist Art Museum would like to thank the sponsors of We Count First-Time Voters. Presenting sponsor HCA Foundation on behalf of HCA TriStar Health. The exhibition is supported in part by Ryman Hospitality Properties Foundation, Neal and Harwell PLC, and O'Keefe Circle members. And as always, we appreciate the continuing operating support from Metro Nashville Arts Commission, Tennessee Arts Commission, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Throughout the conversation, we'll take questions from the audience. Please submit your questions via the Q&A feature anytime throughout the presentation. And thank you in advance for your patience with us as we present this program online. In the event of a technical difficulty, we will pause the presentation and will work quickly to resolve the issue. If you're having technical difficulties on your personal device, please use the chat feature to send Frist IT a message. Now it's my pleasure to turn things over to the Frist Community Engagement Director, Shaun Giles, and We Count artist Thaxton Waters. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you, Megan. Hello, Thaxton.
How you doing?
Can we, I see you still have the your shared screen up. Do we have to have that? All right. All right, and we might come back to that in a minute. So Thaxton, whenever you want to have your artwork pulled back up, just let us know. But thanks, Thaxton, for being here, and thanks everybody out there for being here for this conversation. As Megan mentioned, I'm Shaun Giles. I had the privilege of co-curating this exhibition, and also a great privilege in working with artists like Thaxton and several others to make this project happen. So tonight, this is a great opportunity to kind of chat with you, Thaxton, and also we welcome questions from you all watching. And you know, this kind of feels like a little bit of an interview when we start, but it can be a more organic conversation. We'll just kind of roll into it. And you know, if I just end up asking a series of questions, that's fine too. So just for a little context for you all, for a little context for you all who aren't familiar with the exhibition, who might have just kind of strolled in here and not knowing what you're coming into, this exhibition, We Count First-Time Voters, has been an effort over a year and a half or so to develop an exhibition that honors, in part, honors recognizes the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, guaranteeing women the right to vote. It also was timely because we were coming into an election year, and so he really wanted to push that point home about voting and the importance of it, and sort of put it in a historical context, but also in a contemporary context by hearing some of the current voices of people who recently experienced their first times voting. So Thaxton, I want to get into this a little bit with you. You created a wonderful work of art that is currently on view at the Frist and also on view online. And I want to talk a little bit about sort of your thought process throughout this whole thing. So first, just tell us a little bit about who you are as an artist, who you are as an individual, and a little bit about your work.
Well, Thaxton Waters. I was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee. I went to Tennessee State University. I had a biology background, but I was fascinated by art. So I kind of just like ended up still doing that upon graduation. I kind of found myself very fascinated by the history of North Nashville upon graduation. I knew it was a special place because it had 4 HBCUs in it. And then it seems like my whole upbringing from elementary to middle school to high school, I was like really surrounded by like Black educators and Black intellectuals, and just it was just a nice life. And I didn't even realize how special it was till I got to college. And then I had people from all over across the country come there and then tell me their experiences. And I was like, oh, wow, I grew up in a unique experience. So I started doing more research on North Nashville and how it came about. And down the rabbit hole I went. So that ended up me opening up a spot on Jefferson Street called Art History Class Lifestyle Lounge and Gallery. And it was pretty much a focus on historically Black colleges and universities and the surrounding area. So I just focused on that and gave seniors in college their first solo exhibitions, and people that's in those surrounding neighborhoods their exhibitions as well. So it's a little bit more to that. A lot of programming came out of that, but that started a journey for me. I could talk all night, but that's a summation.
So with that sort of in mind as your background, what drew you to this project? So when we reached out to you, what made you want to do this?
Well, I love history, and I had already been studying. I walk around downtown and I just kind of just like look at the historical markers and the buildings and the architecture. And that War of Roses marker always fascinated me because I just thought it would just be a beautiful picture to paint. But as I did research up on it, I saw everything that went into it, and I was like, wow. So I did this a few years back. So when you approached me for this exhibition, I was like, aha, wonderful. So I get to like pour into it. But like, up on like studying everything more and more and more, I started to see like it was like an untold story to it as well. So if you pull up the picture, we could like go into some of the things in particular, because I would say like over the last 2 to 3 years, that describes a lot of the imagery you see around it and a lot of the text that you see on it. But inside of it goes to more of the conversations I had locally. So like I said, that War of the Roses marker that I saw downtown, that was always fascinating. So you see that with the yellow and the red roses all around it. So the yellow roses represented the women who wanted women to vote. We called them suffrages. And then there was a shortened down to the SUFs while the battle was raging. And then you have the red roses, the anti-suffragists. And they didn't want women to vote. But if you look in closely, kind of embedded in between there, I'm getting more to the story that wasn't told. It's 22 Black roses in the midst of those yellow and red roses. And those are symbolic of the 22 founders of Delta Sigma Theta. So they were present at a lot of the meetings and a lot of the marches that happened around this time in 1920, 1919. So when you look closely at the painting, you'll see these Black roses embedded in the yellow and red roses, and they have red and white paint on them to kind of be symbolic of them and their contributions to the whole march. And I'll get to them later. But if you just like look more around that, you see that around the border. But if you look on there, the text that's on there, so you look around that kind of like that pinkish part, you see text on there. And if you look closely, that says Men Bear Arms. And then at the bottom, it says Women Bear Armies. Now, that phrase was taken from Anne Dallas Dudley. And she was a fighter for women's rights and women's right to vote here in Nashville. So I took the phrase of the painting from that. So I know I can just keep talking, but you can stop me at any time.
Go ahead. Yeah, I was going to ask you about the work anyway. So that, yeah, share as much as you want. That's fine. But
Well, Anne Dallas Dudley, she basically was a local proponent of the suffragist movement. And so as the battle raged between 1919 and then especially in 1920, in March, they had a big women's march. And we can come back to this picture, but if you go to that picture of the Deltas, that Alpha chapter, because those are some of the women that was in that march in March of 1920. And that march was very interesting because it was nobody wanted these women to march with them. And even the suffragists didn't want them to march with them. So they suffered a lot of abuse at that march. And two of the main women in that was Mary Church Terrell. She was more so of a high society African-American woman who was had a suffragist movement at the time, a women's league. And you see that nice lace dress, you see that? So, but she was a high society woman. She knew a lot of people. She had a lot of resources and she used them well. But she more so was trying to basically say, because when the bigger, larger movement that was going along at the time, they said that, yeah, you can march with us, but we're getting a lot of pushback. So if you march with us in the back. So she was just trying to push the whole conversation forward. So she was like, oh, okay, I'll just concede with that. We'll be in the back. But Ida B. Wells, she was also a Delta Sigma Theta. So pull her up. And we know Ida B. Wells to be a fiery journalist, out of Memphis. And we have a statue of Senator Carmike downtown. And he was one of the guys that was associated with like bombing her office down in Memphis that ran her up to Chicago because he really didn't like her and all of her.
Can you say his name again? You broke up a second.
Senator Carmike. That's right down in front of the Capitol. Has a nice statue down there. But he was one of the guys who ran Ida B. Wells because of her just loud voice and her just like, she just would not stop writing about the injustices going on down in Memphis. He had something to do with the bombing of her office because he had a newspaper at that time as well. And so she was a Delta Sigma Theta as well. And she refused to be in the back of the march. So she said, I'm going to march in the front with the delegation. So that's what she did. So one of the main things is the anti-suffragists, the Red Roses, a main thing that they said was if women got the right to vote, that it would like be the destruction of America. Women would forget about the homes. They would not be domesticated and things of that nature. So as you saw Ida B. Wells, she had children. And if you look at Anne Dallas Dudley, you can pull her picture up as well. She was always pictured at the marches with her children. So that was a major blow to the to the anti-suffragist movement because it was like a counter narrative to what they were saying. So I know I probably gave you a few pictures to look at. Oh yeah, that's Anne Dallas Dudley. So she was always pictured with her children, always being motherly. She was well-spoken, educated. So this was a major blow because this was like everything the anti-suffragists were saying. So this was a contentious thing that was going on here in Nashville. So if you read more about it in the Nashville Lifestyles magazine, they did a whole article about the War of the Roses, and it pretty much reads like a Real Housewives of Nashville. Pretty much like in July, pretty much all of the anti-suffragists and the suffragists came down to Nashville and descended down to Hermitage Hotel. So you can show that picture of Hermitage Hotel because it was the first $1 million hotel in the South. So you had all the dignitaries and presidents and everybody staying there. So this became the national headquarters for the War of the Roses. So upon this happening, there's a lot of scandal involved with that. So there's the Hermitage's Hotel right there in all its glory. But it's a lot of scandal, with that. It was a Jack Daniels suite on the 8th floor. There was a lot of bribery going on with a lot of politicians. Carrie Chapman Catt, one of the big suffragists, she said it wasn't a sober politician in Nashville for 48 hours before the vote because there was just so much liquor just flowing around. And this is 1920. This is Prohibition time, mind you. And somebody just came to her and said, that's just the Tennessee way. So this was the big major showdown for the War of the Roses in the Hermitage's Hotel. So that vote went through August of 1920. It was a big eruption. Everybody know the story of Harry T. Byrne. He wore a red rose to legislation that day. He was going to vote on against, but he had a note in his pocket from his mother saying to vote for women. And he changed his vote at the last minute, which erupted the whole floor. And he ended up having to climb out the window to get out of there. So, but 8 days later, white women had the right to vote. So we know later on it took much more before we had equality across the board. So that goes more into the title is Men Bear Arms. But so you can go ahead. I'm just rambling at this point. Go ahead.
I'm just letting you get the rest of it out. So you give us a lot of background on the work itself. I'm interested in sort of the process and how you came to create it. And so part of your process involved, of course, going out and having conversations, and from that sort of generating this work. What kind of conversations did you have? Who did you talk to? Who were you looking for? What was the nature of that part of it?
Well, upon taking it from that title, I kind of went down into the community, especially North Nashville as my dwelling ground. So I had some places in particular that I wanted to hit. So barbershop seems to be a real fertile ground for conversation, especially when you start talking about politics. So I made sure I went to a few barbershops. I made sure I connected with my family members, and I wanted to make sure I spoke with boomers and older family members. And then I made a trip over to a couple of the churches and spoke with some pastors. And then I made a trip over to the NAACP office, since I know they have a lot to do with the registering people to vote. So I kind of just made my way up and down the street just to get people's consensus on. And this is back earlier part of the year. So this is still when we had everybody still on the ticket. So I was just pretty much getting people's consensus. What were people thinking? How do people feel about the process and everything? So that was kind of what I went down into the community to basically just interview people and just to people feel what people just thought about the whole voting process in particular. When was their first time they voted? How did they feel about it? What inspired them to do it? Are they still inspired to do it now? So I know a lot of when I spoke to a lot of people, younger people, a lot of them was very, very inspired by Barack Obama to vote for the first time. So because I know that was what we was talking about, the first time voters, and I saw that was a lot of people who voted for the first time voted for Barack Obama, and then they voted for him again on the second term. So then we started having conversations on do they still have that same inspiration? And it seems like it kind of transitioned into since they were just kind of getting into the whole political foray, they was inspired to get into it, but now they have to look more detailed at what's actually going on a local level. So that's what I kind of found out from the younger crowd. But we can go in particular into what I found at each location in each age group.
Yeah, I'm interested in
that kind of goes into the conversations of what happens in the center of the painting.
Right. So it sounds like you were, just kind of going through North Nashville, just kind of catching people where you could, maybe in and out of barbershops. What were those, where did you get the inspiration to kind of take the painting in that direction, where you get to the center of the painting?
I would say it was really the barbershop talks, because it's so multi-generational in there. And I had a lot of conversations with men who had fought in wars. So, so it would be men my age. I'm 40. So it was like guys in there who fought in the Iraq War. Then you had guys in there who had fought in the Vietnam War. Then you had guys who had fought in there who was there in the 90s. When I was a young guy fighting Saddam Hussein. Then you had guys who were in there was in Vietnam, So then you had guys in there who said that their dad had fought in World War II. And I would say that they're consensus on, because like in the painting, you'll see that I have every representation from, I tried to have every representation from the American Revolutionary War all the way up into present wars, because we have fought in every last one. And, but the fruit of the freedom, democracy, and everything hasn't been gained totally. So these men are going off to, in particular, it was a story I read about. His name was James Robinson, and he fought in the American Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. So he was promised his freedom in the American Revolutionary War, and he was promised his freedom from Andrew Jackson in the War of 1812. So he finally passed away in 1868, and he was, I guess 3 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. So it's just like for him to just like be disillusioned that whole time. And it's the same kind of like feeling as I read that. It's the same type of feeling that a lot of these men that I spoke to still have, and this is going all the way back to the American Revolutionary War. So if these men still have this sentiment all the way up to this point after fighting all of these wars and still coming back home to be called, the N-word, and be, have to get off the curb when they see somebody walk down the street, or, it's just like all the things, all the stories that I've heard, talking to these men, and then all the stories that I heard while they were in service. So, and this is just not men who were in there in the 60s and 70s. These are men that was like in there, like I said, in the 90s and 2000s, the things that they were still talking about. So that kind of like led me to like saying, yes, women bear armies, but the armies that are being born are still not reaping the full benefits of this American pie, this American dream. Not to get too graphic, but the pink kind of represents them being born. and as we can look on there, you see all throughout it, we can see some of the things throughout time that led to some of them not being given the right to vote. You can see like the representations of the Jim Crow characters all around it in the corners. And then I have the words of like grandfather clauses and poll taxes and literacy test. And if you look at the cigar smoke coming out of the one crow, it's the Klan. So all of these things that led to like voter suppression, like I said, yes, it might have passed in 1920, but it was all of those things still going on all the way up into 1965 to where everybody could get the right to vote.
And we might still see instances of voter suppression even now, or manipulation of lines and gerrymandering and all kinds of things that still keep that alive to some extent. So you kind of touched on it. What was the tone of these conversations? Was it all sort of feeling sort of overwhelmed and like they never really had that piece of the pie, or was there some hope? Was there something positive they kind of took from those conversations?
Well, it seems kind of like the older men, even though they still experience what they experienced, they still had a sense of extreme pride. So they still was able to come back, and I think due to the time period that they was living in the 70s and 80s, they were still able to get part of that, I would say that middle class lifestyle that was kind of like being issued out around that time. But I think, and then, you know, being in the military, you can come out and then kind of like make a way for yourself with certain jobs and certain placement and things of that nature. So they still have a lot of extreme pride and brotherhood within it. But I think their sentiment, overall, the sentiment was, and still a lot of the men was like saying, yes, you still need to go, because like I said, it goes back to the pride. They think men need to, like, you know, shape up and get some discipline, and need to know how to, like, you know, make up a bed and iron their shirts and all kind of stuff like that. So these are things that they feel like men need to do. But it was, I would say, this is the thing that I had with my gallery. This is the thing that I discovered with my gallery. Me being 40 years old and being right at the tail end of Generation X, I saw that I was a kind of go-between between the millennials and zennials and the boomers and silent. So I would come in with all of this energy, asking all these questions, and a lot of them, and it would be a lot of zealous energy, mind you, and a lot of them, they would have the kind of the sentiment of, I'm voting for Biden no matter what. And this is, mind you, this is early on in the season. I think this is probably back in December, January, February, when I was having these conversations. And it was confusing, and because Biden was still on the ticket, all these other people were still on the ticket. I mean, Bernie Sanders was still on the ticket, and so it was like a lot of conversation about, like, you know, he's a socialist and he's this and he's that. And I was like, wow, are these people? And then I had to put myself in the mindset. I said, they're older. They watch a lot of Fox News and MSNBC. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm putting myself in the mindset of my mom. This is like, okay, so they just get the news from that source. Right. So I was like, okay. So I just had to just like really just kind of just like understand what I was talking to, the people that I was talking to, and understanding the history that went along with it. They were going to vote Democrat no matter what. I would say probably by the time you got down to the my age group, they were starting to be a little bit more, I'm going to see what each candidate says. And then I know, like, when I got down to the millennials and zennials, they were just excited. And then they were just kind of just like, you know, excited about the whole process. And they had a lot to say, you know. Yeah. But it seems like the older generation was kind of like, you know, pretty much stuck on what they were going to do. And it seems like the kind of like my generation was in between. And it was very interesting going over and talking to the NAACP, because they actually go around and try to register people to vote. So if they're registering people to vote, most of the people they're going to be talking to are young, because they go out to like college campuses and things like that. And they even had a whole bus, Black Voters Matter. So they went out and then just registering people. But it's like he talking to the guy over there, name is Timothy Hughes over there at NAACP. He said it's hard to get people excited about voting, you know, when he's going out and talking to these impoverished and marginalized communities, because they just don't see it trickling down to them. And they just can't understand why they should do it and why it matters, because they vote for a person, then nothing happens. Then they vote for a person, nothing happens, as far as they can see it. So he said it's really hard to try to like get them excited about getting out and voting, you know. So that was a very interesting conversation.
Well, I'm also interested. So it sounded like you were talking primarily to groups of men. I imagine you connected with with women and younger girls through other conversations. But did you have any of these more extended conversations with women or with teen girls or anybody in that age range, or was most of your conversations with with men through barbershops, or was it kind of a mixed sort of group?
Most of my conversations were with men. If it so happened to be women in there, I would talk to them. So if it was like a woman bringing her son to the barbershop, or if it was like some women activists in NAACP office, or it would be like women at the churches and things like that. So I'll talk to them about their sentiment about it then. They was very excited about Kamala Harris. Kamala, but they was very excited about her. Yeah, I think they was really excited about seeing representation in the White House.
Yeah, and I just wondered if you had a chance to talk about some of this history, especially in women's suffrage, with any of the women you spoke to, or if they had any perspectives on that, or if that's something that you didn't have a chance to discuss as much.
Yeah, the ones that were actually, because when I was in the NAACP office, they were quite aware of the suffragist movement. And so when I brought it to them and had the conversation with one of the older ladies in particular, she was quite aware of it. And she she was quite funny because she started talking about like, well, yeah, we always was the bullhorn for these movements, and then these white women got all the credit. That's basically what she said, and I was like, oh well, yeah, that's pretty much what was going on, you know. And then she brought up Frankie Pierce, so she was and because she was, I would say she was probably in her 70s. So when she was like a young girl, she remember hearing that name, you know, around Nashville. So she had brought her up to me. So I think she was quite aware of women being in all of these movements and being loud, kind of like advertisement for things, and getting and basically bringing a lot of attention to things, but then being pushed into the back. So she was quite aware of that history. When I tried to bring it up to her, she silenced me real quick and started telling me things.
Yeah. It's interesting that,
because, you know, like a lot of conversations I go into, that's a lot of the history that I love. I love digging up history of maybe unknown things and untold things, and even about present things. So like when I was going into these conversations with a lot of these men in these barbershops or wherever these places at, I'll just be in the local chicken shop, you know what I'm saying? Just like talking to people. If they were set in their mind on who they was going to vote for or which party they was riding for, it was no convincing them of otherwise, you know. And I was like, and no matter what I brought up about each candidate's past, whether I talked about Trump, what he did and all the stuff that he did, whether I talked about any of the Democratic like people and all the stuff that they did in the past, or whether I talked about, you know, Bernie and all the stuff, whatever, people pretty much had their minds made up. And they kind of looked at me as, why are you telling me these things?
Right. Well, and I appreciate your point about the mention of how Black women were sort of such a big part of the movement, even early in the 20th century, and sort of not being given the credit. It actually, I hear that a lot even now, that Black women are at the front of a lot of movements and are not often given the credit, not often recognized, and even to the point where we hear that people aren't really, you know, nobody's at the front of the movement for Black women. So it's interesting to hear, you know, how that perception sort of has existed for a
yes, because it's like it's the same argument that Frederick Douglass had even back then, you know, with Susan B. Anthony and everybody. It was just like these Black women are going through hell, you know, and we don't ever hear y'all coming out speaking and yelling for them, but yet they're always coming out and speaking for you. And this is what Frederick Douglass was saying.
Right.
So for us to still be having this conversation up until this point, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you another thing about just, I guess, with a project like this. So you spoke to these groups, and you're responsible for taking what you hear, sort of synthesizing it into a work of art. Did you feel any pressure to do that? Was there any personal pressure to communicate that message the right way, or did that come with, was that part of it?
No, not really, because my dad, he was in the military. So my dad, like pretty much the same things that I heard from a lot of these men in these barbershops, because like I think that's what really started to make me, that's why the whole inside of the painting turned into like military men, because it was just like really the conversations I had with them were the most were the strongest, the most heated. They're like, boy, you don't know what you're talking about. And then, it's like, okay, son, I'll sit down. And I think those conversations, it had the same kind of like tone that my dad had when I was being raised. And because my dad was born in 1944, went into the military. He hated it because of the racism he experienced in there. He told me he was he tried to escape out of the military, and then the military police came looking for him out in Wilson County and found him in a barn because he couldn't stand being in the military because of all the things he experienced in there. And so he always told me growing up, even though I kind of think about like when I graduated from high school in '98, I was like, man, I wish I would have went to the military because I would have, got a little bit more structure in my artistic wild life, But my dad growing up, my dad was just always saying like, you don't want to be in the military, son. You do not go there. So, but at the same time, he would tell me about the world travel. And then I have like photo albums of him being in Okinawa and all these places. And he told me about all his travels and all the wonderful times he had. But he just didn't like his authority figures and his commanders and all those people, because it was just too much for him. Yeah. But he had the same type of sentiment that pretty much the men in the barbershop had. So I pretty much just channeled him in the making of the painting, you know what I'm saying, and listening and just remembering those conversations that I had with them.
And well, maybe this is a good time to go to our Q&A. We do have one question. Let's see.
One? No, I was kidding.
And this is just a question about the work. How did you come up with the contrast to use all images of men?
Well, since the conversation pretty much revolved around women, I thought that would just be like a good, juxtaposition, is to like throw some men in there, like in the middle. That's why I keep on referring to the pink part. I was trying to basically like, have them being born out of this, because it's like men bear arms, but women bear armies. So I was trying to have the image look like armies were being born. But I don't know if it necessarily came out like that. But but that was the juxtaposition, because the whole conversation is around women's right to vote. But the armies that they bore, though, it's like they never got the full recognition that they fought for.
Great. Well, another thing I want to ask you about, 2020 is happening to us right now. So
happening to us.
So how do you think these, if you had these conversations last week rather than, earlier this year, how do you think they would be different? Would they be different?
Wow. You know what? One major thing that I remember, like one black man said off in one of the barbershops, and it struck me when he said this. because he said it to me quietly. And I remembered this when he said it to me quietly. And then after I left, I didn't think about it. It's like 2 or 3 hours after I left. And I was like, why did he say that to me quietly? And he was like, just saying how a lot of these parties, and he was referring to the Democratic Party in particular. He was like saying that the Democratic Party is not listening to Black men, or not even like talking to us, or not even like trying to like think about what we want or what we, but whenever they talk about us, they say something about criminal justice or reform or something like that. And this is like, we're more than that. Come on now. So he was almost kind of like telling me that he was going for Trump. But I didn't think about it till I.
We lost you. Matt, do you have any suggestions? Oh, there you are.
There you go. No.
Oh, wow. Where did I cut out at?
Gosh, you
were just going to say your quiet conversation. You thought he almost might be going for Trump.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you still hear me now, though?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, good. But yeah, like when I left, I was like, why did he have to say that to me quietly? But I thought about it. I was like, he said that to me quietly because he knew if he would have like said that out loud, he probably would have got mauled in that barbershop, you know. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, how many more Black men are thinking like that? You know, and then like as throughout the season, like I started thinking about what he said. And then as the ads came out from both campaigns, I was like, I really don't see nothing directed towards the men per se. Until I saw like a ad in particular that had like some strippers on it. But I was like, I'm not even gonna get into that. But but I was like, okay, is this the only kind of like, you know, ad that we gets focused on us, you know? So I thought about what he said. So yeah. So I you know, closer to the election, I thought about that. I was like, how many men are gonna quietly come out? You know, now it looks like Biden is going to win, you know what I'm saying, once all the votes come in. But I was like thinking, how many men are actually going to like vote for Trump this time? And I'm not even saying anything.
Right.
Yeah. So I had a lot of thoughts coming up to this election.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And when you look at what they're showing us, Black men, there were a few more voting in that direction than before. So you wonder what is behind sort of that thinking. Let's see. So as far as just your personal sort of journey through this, did you learn anything about your community? Did you learn anything about yourself? Something that maybe you didn't recognize or know? Anything that stood out or made you sort of reflect on the people around you?
I would say like going into these, I would say for me personally, I would say I need to go into these environments and have these conversations more readily. You know what I'm saying? Because I was like, I saw how healthy it was to go into these conversations, into these rooms and have these conversations. Because I was like, I need to do it consistently. Because I was like, even if people don't even have the same you know, opinion about things, they at least need to voice it and hear it. And even if it's a guy in the background that's not saying anything, he's hearing two perspectives or like a whole lot of perspectives. But it goes deeper than just like seeing memes and just like news feeds on like Instagram and Facebook. It's just like you need to have real conversations on what's going on in your community and what's going on with like politicians in your community and what their platforms are and what they're talking about and the resources they're talking about actually bringing to the community. Because I saw a lot of people are really not engaged unless it's like on a national level. And it's just like throughout a lot of the conversations, they was like saying like no, son, you need to like get involved on the local level, you know. So I need to go into these rooms, and just like the art that I was bringing, I knew that there had to be an educational component before people valued it on a certain level. So educate, and then they'll understand. So I took that away from myself. I need to go into these environments and do it a little bit more.
Okay. And is this something that you've done to some degree? I know you had the Lifestyle Lounge on Jefferson Street. Had you ever just kind of done these conversations just outside of that context? Just just you thought about it and you decided to do it?
Well, I'm always going around talking somewhere, but I did a lot of it from inside the gallery, and then a lot of the workshops and a lot of the programming I did, and then throughout the Jefferson Street Art Crawl. It's just always a component of what I do, is always teaching history and then relating it to today. So whether it's economic, social, political, whatever's going on, if it was happening back then, I try to parallel it what's going on right now. So I would say it's like since this whole COVID year, things have slowed down dramatically. But I would say as things open back up more, you're definitely going to see me around more, talking in spaces and places where people want to have these conversations. So I'm definitely not afraid to have them.
Right. Yeah. And well, have any of the people you talked to, have they seen the work? Has anybody had a chance to respond to the work, or kind of see what you turned their conversations into?
Yeah, my cousin, like one of the older gentlemen, he's like from the boomer generation. He was he was hiding with my daddy off in that barn when the military police came out and looked for him. He was one of the gentlemen I came and talk to. He went up there to the Frist and he saw it. He said, "Man, you got all that from those conversations." So it's appreciated. It's appreciated. I've got a few texts and a few DMs of people telling me that they appreciated the conversations, and they saw it on Talk of the Town the other day, and they remembered the conversations we had earlier this year, and a lot of the things that I told them or we talked about earlier this year, they just remembered them throughout the year, going up to the election, the voting days, and stuff like that. So it was kind of like a unfolding process throughout the whole year. And like after we had those conversations, they just kept on like sending me texts and just sending me like, "Man, you know what I thought about that, what you said, and you know what, this is interesting," or "I can't wait to see that when that comes out and see what you took those conversations and did with them." So yeah, I have been getting that throughout the whole year.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that people have had an opportunity to see it. And you kind of get that feedback from it. And we do have a Q&A question. Let me see. Well, it says, Emily Pacino asks, "It seems like last winter was a million years ago. What might you create with your art today? Or what are you working on now?"
Well, I would say, you know what, this year has made everybody really focus on family. So like I started really thinking about family and what makes a person secure. And so I did a lot of gardening this year. And I was consulting with people who had gardens and yards and small acreage and things like that. So I've been a lot of growing. I had a good spring garden and a good summer garden, but not too good in the fall. I waited a little round too late. So it was more so about like growing my own food and like having and spending time with family and traditions. And so that kind of led me into like thinking about my dad, who passed away about 3 years ago, and Wilson County. That's where a lot of my people are from. And Watertown in particular, hence Thaxton Waters, Waterstown. And so if you look in Souls of Black Folk by W.B. Du Bois, when he was a student at Fisk University, they used to send the students out to go teach summer school. And one of the cities that he went and taught summer school in was Watertown. So so they still have like a little old school that he taught in out in Watertown and everything. So he might have taught some of my descendants out there, because I still have people out there. So I've been doing like a lot of paintings of just like, you know, what I call in my head screen door, old screen door houses, you know, screen door people, you know what I'm saying? Just kind of like old grandmas and, you know, granddads, and just like people that had like just rural and just like outhouses, and just like just a lot of the stuff that I remember from when I was growing up in the 80s, and my dad taking me out into those into Mount Juliet and Bedford County and Gladeville, and to like visit family. And we'd be like in these little small shanties and shacks, and I'll just be just like looking around. But it's just like, man, looking back on it now, it's just like, I'm so appreciative that I got that experience. Oh my goodness, I'm so appreciative that I got that experience, because by the time the early 2000s came and I was in college ripping, running around and doing what I was doing, all that stuff had pretty much vanished. And so I'm just kind of just like really recapturing those moments in Canvas right now.
Okay. Well, we still have a few minutes. And then, so if we had any more, I don't think we have any more Q&A right now, but if anybody has any questions, we're happy to take those. Otherwise, Thaxton, if you have any just final words or final statement that you want to make or anything, you're welcome to.
Just be looking for them. I'm kind of like a hermit, as everybody probably knows, but just kind of, I pop up every now and then on Instagram. So just kind of like look for me on Instagram, whatever I post on there. I'm trying to get a little bit more active and more consistent on there. But
I noticed that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying. But yeah, I'm trying to get more active and consistent on Shaun, because I'm always busy doing something. It's kind of like I always say, my hands are always on the plow, and then sometimes I just got to look up every now and then and kind of like look at the world around me, because I'm always busy doing something. But I just need to post it more and show people what I'm doing, as my sister gets on me about. She's like, you be doing everything, you don't tell nobody about it. I'm like, oh well. So I'm gonna get better about that. So just look for me on Instagram, Art History Class LLG.
Right. Thank you, Thaxton. Thanks everybody else. And Thaxton, thanks not only for tonight, but thanks for the project and being part of that, and everything that you put into it. We appreciate it. And I'll turn it back over to Megan.
Thank you so much, Shaun. Thank you, Thaxton, for sharing your work with us this evening. And thank you all for attending tonight's program. We invite you to see We Count first-time voters at the Frist Art Museum. You can reserve your timed ticket for admission to the Frist Art Museum on our website. And we hope to see you in person soon or virtually at our next online program. Find out more about our upcoming virtual programs by visiting fristartmuseum.org, by following us on social media at Frist Art Museum, or by signing up for our weekly email newsletter. And as you leave the Zoom tonight, you'll be invited to take a brief survey. A link to the survey will appear in your browser. Your feedback is important to us and will help us improve future programs. And finally, we are so thankful for your support of the Frist Art Museum. Financial gifts during this time allow us to bring you great programming like tonight's event. Support of any amount is greatly appreciated. Please consider making a donation at fristartmuseum.org. Thank you all so much for joining us, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.